Welcome to the Cosmics Innerspace podcast. I'm Kammie K, Innerspace Surfer and Cosmic Creatrix at KammieK.com. Are you ready to launch a business, expand your cosmic consciousness, amp your intuition, or simply celebrate the everyday messiness of being human? Then the Cosmics Innerspace podcast is for you. Inside each episode, we'll demystify the mystical and provide practical magic for everyday alchemy. We honor an intuitive and spirited lifestyle that elevates and explores life's multidimensional mysteries. Eavesdrop in on conversations with artists and authors, kick-ass creatives, entrepreneurs, and everyday innerspace surfers just like you who are diving deep and glowing up in a whole new world. Stay tuned for innerspace best practices and sustainable business tools to help you navigate the new now. Let these stories inspire you to cultivate your curiosity, elevate your mindset, and explore your own cosmic's inner space. Let's dive into the show. Welcome, fellow innerspace surfer. Today's episode is a juicy one. This one is literally eavesdropping in on a chat between two friends because today I'm talking with Karen Chontafalsky, a.k.a. Nerdy Girl Career Coach. Karen and I go way back to our days working together as career coaches in the MBA program at the Carey School of Business at Arizona State University. Karen has 16 years of experience, starting with her first role at jobbing.com, a startup multi-local job board answering job seeker emails, and finishing her tenure there as the director of job seeker experience. She holds an MBA from Arizona State University and is a certified job and career transition coach. Karen has worked as a career coach and resume writer for 3 separate MBA programs and 2 outplacement firms. In her current private coaching practice, she uses her years of perspective with a front row view of talent recruitment to help her clients move forward. Karen is passionate about helping people figure out their next career move and then how to get there. She's also a self-proclaimed dork who loves reading, sci-fi, biking, and playing board and card games. Nerds are her people. Nerds of all sorts. Karen loves witnessing the passion of people who care enough about a topic to learn about it deeply. And I know that she can help you navigate tricky career advancement tasks and make your career transitions more successful and way less painful. So we'll be sure to link her up in the show notes. So without further ado, welcome to my convo with Karen.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Fantastic.
I feel like we were just here.
We were just here.
So yes, for listeners, Karen and I had a, what did you call it? Power channeling. I freaking loved that. I was like, yeah, that's what we did. It was intense. We had a 2-hour coach each other session. And we were tuned into the quantum. We were tuned into our higher selves. We were tuned in. It was so juicy.
I was tired afterwards. I almost fell asleep during dinner. I was so tired.
Yeah, we worked through a lot of stuff. So, yeah, I could share oodles and oodles about that, but I guess, so let me start with this. Karen and I know each other. What year because I started at ASU. So Karen and I worked together at the Carey School of Business at ASU. I worked there from 2010 to 2018. And so what year did you pop into my life?
I think it was at 2011 or 2012. It was one of the two.
Yeah, it wasn't long after I had been there. And I was career coaching MBA students, and I was tasked with working with online MBA, evening MBA, weekend MBA, and executive MBA. And so they had the coaches broken down to, different groups of MBA. They had, a lot of them supported the full-time MBA students. And at that time, right, 2011, things were really different. They look very different than they look right now. And so I was struggling with some of the technology pieces and ways to reach our online students. And I was like, I need an angel to pop into my life to help support me in figuring out how we reach these amazing online students, but they needed more support and people weren't really engaging in webinars and some of the other things that we were trying. And so So Karen fell into my life at that moment.
Yeah, and I came to you from a background where I was working at an online job board, and I was wanting to focus on, and I also worked in outplacement as part of that role, and I really wanted to focus on just coaching all of the time, but I could bring that online working for an online resource. I could bring all of that to the table, so we balanced each other really well.
We did. And I remember in your interview, you saying, you basically, they kept just putting more on your plate, and like your role just kept expanding organically, as it would, I imagine, at a startup, right? Because jobbing was a startup at that point. And that you were answering all these questions of customers, and you were like, oh, I'm building out the FAQs. Like I keep responding one on. And so you are so great at figuring out like, how do we scale things? And really putting action to it. So that's how Karen and I kind of complement, because I'm vision, strategy, big picture, and Karen was able to help. We would have these awesome sessions at ASU where we would sit in there. I'd be like, I need to know how to break this all down. It feels so overwhelming. And you're like, we got this. And
and we'd have like just a project planning session. And so I was able to bring that like working with IT project planning stuff to
which
it.
That part still feels scary to me today, but I'm trying to obviously overcome it. So anyway, that's just a little snippet of background of kind of how we played together back then, and the beauty of, social media and life, right? You live in Illinois now, and I'm still in Arizona. And we've stayed in touch. And so we're both at this evolutionary stage with these new creations we're putting together. You're advancing your business, and I'm at the very beginning stages of growing mine. And so we're like, let's power jam together and like help each other with. And the thing that you're really working on, which is why I've invited you here today for us to have a deeper dive into this, is the power of storytelling. So with that being said, let's dive into your story. Tell me all about you.
Well, it's interesting. I don't talk about my story a whole bunch these days because I do so much career coaching. The thing that I end up focusing on the most is other people's stories. So just thinking about my journey over the last 10, 12 years and what it took to get to here, to where we are right in this moment. Just the past couple of days has been a little overwhelming. I've had to
In what way?
In what way?
Let's share with the people the process.
Yes. So I think it's overwhelming in the way that it's probably overwhelming for a lot of my clients, is that, it's not just a story, it's your life. Right. So, it's more than just this narrative I'm telling. There's emotions that are connected with all of these different parts. And sometimes, things that I worked really hard to move from. So anytime you're telling the story, and the context is like, how am I sort of creating an image of myself? Is it accurate? Like, always really wanting to be authentic. And am I tapping into something right now that I don't want to be tapping into?
Yeah.
So just trying to be mindful of like when you're re-engaging, especially with parts of your past that are painful, and you start to storytell, because this will happen in interviews where you have to talk about jobs that you didn't like or managers that you didn't like. They'll ask for that storytelling, and it's like, okay, how do I engage with it in a way that's healthy, in a way that's productive, and that says things about me I want to actually say.
Yeah, and that you don't get triggered emotionally in an interview situation.
Right? Because they ask big, detailed questions.
Yeah, tell me about your biggest failure. Well, that's a dumb fucking question, first of all. Right? Sometimes I'm like, what? We won't even get into my issues with the whole process of like hiring and interviewing. It does feel like things are shifting a bit. So
yes,
that's a breath of fresh air. But anyway, so let's walk back, because before we hit record, I said to Karen, I've been friends with you for how freaking long now, and I still have no idea how you got from French horn, which is what you were studying in college, to career advisor. So let's go back a little bit further and kind of just tell us like where you grew up and what you were into as a kid and whatever. Because on our coaching session, we also both shared that looking back, we see the threads of the things that we were interested in, or the things that we were good at, or the things that we had that brought us joy, even way back when we were kids. So let's hop in the time machine and go back a little.
Yeah, go back to little bitty Karen.
Yeah.
So when I was younger, two things I really, really loved. So first off, I loved writing. I loved reading and writing. Like, I was a block away from a Carnegie library, so this big, beautiful library in a very small town, and a town where there wasn't a lot of these big, beautiful.
What town?
Architecture. Centralia, Illinois. So tiny.
Shout out Centralia.
Hey, Centralia. A small town in Southern Illinois, and I had this gorgeous Carnegie Library a block away. So reading was big and important and kind of monumental in my childhood. So and you know, I could sort of leave this very kind of small town by sort of traveling through all of these books, and it was like I was always allowed to read. Like there was no restriction there.
Did you have the bookmobile?
No.
Do you know what a bookmobile is?
Yes, I've heard of them, but we didn't have one in our town.
Yeah, well, I went to Catholic school from like 3rd grade to like 8th grade, and we didn't have a huge library at the school. And so the bookmobile would come, and it was like, you know, a mobile book unit. And it was just like, I just remember always being like, the bookmobile is coming. And then in the summer too, this was in St. Louis where I was at that point, the Pizza Hut reading challenge is that what it was called?
Book it was like, yes.
I was like, give me another gold star.
Yes. And I loved doing the book challenge because, you know, it was like, oh, I'm going to get pizza for something I'm already doing.
Yes.
Sure. Sweet.
Yeah. Okay, sorry to interrupt. Continue.
Yeah. So books and reading and, you know, stories were a big part of my life then. And I was in love with Shel Silverstein, was one of my favorite authors. I loved his
Where
poems.
the Sidewalk Ends.
Oh, my goodness. So in 5th grade, I entered Young Authors Contest, and I won for my school, which was so exciting. And I got to go to but they were for poems. They were for poems that were a lot like Shel Silverstein's, and I can share a short one with you, and it's about Thanksgiving.
Please do, yeah.
So it's and this is one I had to read when I got my award. It was Thanksgiving turkey on the table. Grab a plate full, turn on the cable. Gobble, 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 it's all gone. Now look how much you've put on.
You did this in 5th grade?
Yeah.
Nice.
Isn't that amazing?
That's so awesome. Gobble, gobble, gobble. Yeah, we're going to eat and sit in front of the TV, y'all. Yeah. Right? I think we all, that's what Thanksgiving, you know, was and is for many still.
Right.
Yeah.
So I channeled some truth there for people. It spoke to them.
Love it.
And so so that was kind of like early stirrings of Karen. And I also, right around that time, I started playing French horn too. So like those were really the biggest things for me.
So you were a band kid.
Yep, I was a band kid and I was a book nerd, and those were really.
You're just painting such a lovely picture. I get it. I'm seeing you.
Yeah. So that was really, you know, some of the biggest things that I sort of used to explore the world. You know, getting to know the world of classical music and music in general, and having conversations with other people through that medium, and figuring out how quickly. You know, when I was meeting people, I was a shy person. When I would meet people, I had a hard time connecting and verbalizing and sort of opening myself up to people. But with music, I could get to know people, I felt like, really quickly, and get to a point where you know, there was that easy back and forth that I didn't have when I was talking with them. So those things stayed really important to me for quite some time. I think and
you continued French horn through high school?
Yeah.
And then did that lead to scholarship is that?
all kinds of stuff. It really is the thing that got me out of my little town, right? I got scholarships to go to school. I had other musicians too that were I was lucky to have a group of musicians that went through high school with me that were really talented, and because of them and being able to learn from them as peers and kind of develop through that, it made a big difference. So that peer learning was important from the beginning.
Yeah.
And then so I went through undergrad and my master's in
Where'd you
music.
go?
Well, I did a lot of touring in my undergrad. I was figuring some things out like a lot of people did in undergrad.
Tell us
And
where you bounced around from.
I went so I started at U of I, then went down to Southern Illinois University at Carbondale where I finished. And then once I graduated from my undergrad, I went out to Arizona and I studied at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff.
And so what brought you from like Midwest to Arizona? Was it the program? Was it just like a really stellar music program? Like how did that get on your radar?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I had a teacher for 1 year in my undergrad. She was my previous teacher who I'd had since, I was in 6th grade. I studied with him privately. He moved to Memphis, and I had actually auditioned to go down to Memphis and do my grad work with him and go study with him again because I loved studying with him. But one of one of the interim teachers that I had met got a gig at NAU, and she was like, "Hey, I can get you an assistantship at NAU if you want to go to Arizona." And all of a sudden, I Google um, Flagstaff, which I'd never heard of, and I was like, "Hey, that place looks amazing."
Beautiful.
And it ended up being a great assistantship. It was with like the band program, which is not anything I had a huge interest in, but I was like, sure, I can help with the marching band to get, my grad school paid
free.
for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I went out and followed her. She allowed me to put 10 boxes into her moving truck.
Oh, that's
and
so nice.
and move out there with her, and I helped her pack and get ready. She was also planning, I think, a wedding and stuff at the time, so we helped each other. It was that theme of mutual benefit.
Yeah. Isn't it awesome too when those people like just sort of cross your path and it's like that whole reason, season, lifetime thing, right? Like sometimes people just drop in and then they drop back out, or you and her, I'm assuming, engaged throughout your stay there, but like who knows for how long after, right? Like I just love that. Like if you're open to receiving it in a way that you're like, this is for a whole nother podcast, but right, if you're open to receiving it in a way that is unexpected or like that you would never have guessed, like you got to put your stuff on her truck. You didn't even have to get your own truck. Like that's,
I know, it was amazing. It was amazing.
Early days of manifestation. You probably didn't even know what you were doing.
Right. And she got a personal assistant during her move and planning a wedding and
win-win,
all of it. Yeah. So so we went across the country. I got to see places I'd never seen before. I'd never been through New Mexico and I'd never been to the desert.
Doesn't the desert look like Mars the first time like it literally looks like another planet?
Yeah, I was like, oh, I'm moving to the moon, or like it was just completely alien. But like I couldn't stop like just staring at it and just being like in awe. And
it's
then
mesmerizing.
when I got to Flagstaff, I was like, I can't believe I've never lived any place that was that pretty. Now, not that there isn't places of beauty in Southern Illinois, and I've come to appreciate the beauty of a cornfield in a different way coming back to it.
Yeah.
But at the time I'd never been around mountains, and so all of that really sort of picturesque beauty was sort of new to me, and it was mesmerizing. I was in love with Arizona like from minute one.
Arizona is magic. I've lived here since 2008, 10 of those years in Phoenix, and I've been up here in Prescott, which is northern Arizona, pretty close to Flagstaff, a couple hours, for 2.5 years. It's magic. There's just, if people have not been, let's do a little plug for AZ. Well, just the desert and the whole Southwest is like,
Yes.
it's just a whole different bag of tricks. And what's interesting is like 20 minutes in any direction, the landscape changes. Like you think it's like the traditional kind of what you see in Phoenix, right? The cactus and kind of dry and some of that neutral palette or whatever. But like every single place you go in the state, it looks different. It's really cool. Yeah.
Well, and it was a different experience for me too, because I was used to being in places where all of the land was either farm or park or town, like there was no unused land, right? Or sort of untamed open land. And I actually got to go to places where there were no roads to get through. Like I was my dad even at one point asked me to keep sending him maps, and I'd send him like the third or fourth map, and I'm like, Dad, what are you wanting on a map that I'm not getting you? And he's like, well, I need one with all of the roads. I was like, oh no, I understand the problem now. There are no roads there.
Yeah. Hello, Grand Canyon. Hello, just
I'm like, no,
state land. Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so if you look to the right of this highway, there's nothing there. It's just, well, there's something there, but it's not like it's not roads and towns and things. It's not a park. It's just mountain and cragginess, and I don't even know how you would start to like. So just having those inaccessible kind of hard terrain areas, where like that's like living in a mythical fairyland compared to like everything's already a park or a
strip mall
or a farm. It's something for consumption, like but like that is, it's just its own thing.
It just is. Yeah, I remember when I drove across country in my tiny little VW Beetle convertible at the time with 2 dogs on my lap. My dad was driving. I had 2 dogs on my lap, and the back seat was full of stuff. I remember just thinking, like, how did people do this in covered wagons and on
no joke
horse? I couldn't wrap my brain around like how people did that. Like,
it's just so brave,
the journey. Well, and then now obviously being here and learning more about the land and the people who really tended to the land and lived off and like everything was in harmony and plants were medicine and, you know, all of those layers, which we won't get into today, but holy wow. Right. And I think that like speaks to some of the magic too, where it's just, it's baked into the, well, that's a cool experience. Like,
yes, it was very cool.
So was that, speaking of storytelling, was that somewhat foreshadowing of some of those challenges then that you like had to maneuver through maybe in college or working on your master's, or like, let's step into that phase and French horn and.
Yeah, so going into the wilds, coming to Arizona, that was really kind of where I became an adult. And I think I had to do a lot of growing up and actually figuring out what were the things that, you know, you don't know which dragons you're slaying when you're young. You know, you just don't know what fights. Like you're so immersed in the fight, and you don't know what those struggles even are. So I was regularly, I think, getting my butt kicked by things I didn't understand, and I was just trying to make the next best decision. Right? It wasn't. There was never really an understanding of who I was, right, or what was actually kicking my tail all the time.
So with that, was there still something calling to you or speaking to you or on a higher level that was like keeping you a bit above some of the like minutia of, you know, navigating through evolving as a human, right? Like, so was there still something that was like pulling you a little bit along as you stumbled along the path?
Yeah, I think I let other people, you know, I would anchor myself to other people and kind of be drawn through whatever other people's stuff was. Right?
Are you also saying men? Because I mean, you and I share a lot of the same DNA, right? Like people pleasing, over perfectionisticness, codependency. You know, I mean, we don't need to air all of it right here, but yeah, for sure. Like, oh, this guy's into this music. Now I'm into that kind of music. Or, oh, so-and-so dresses like that. That looks cool. Let me try to, and you try it on. Right. And you're like, but this doesn't feel like me.
Right.
Yeah.
I was constantly just sort of like I was attracted to like really kind of over the top,
Mm-hmm.
gregarious people, like especially being a little shy and retreating, or of kind of wanting to be behind it, but also being attracted to like them, wanting what they had, basically,
Mm.
that being able to step into yourself
Yeah.
and project and give.
Sure.
So I was attracted to big personalities in my friends,
Mm-hmm.
strong personalities, and ones that ended up taking a lot of the oxygen in every room that I was in.
Mm.
So that happened in relationships, mentors, friends. Like that was just a pattern that kept going and going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think it helped me. I think I learned a lot about what was good for me and what wasn't
Mm-hmm.
good for me in that time. And I think through that, at some point, um, I think I started to go, okay, no, what is it that I started actually asking myself, but what do you think? But
Mm-hmm.
but what do you want?
I think at that age, there can be a lot of like wanting to hitch our wagon to someone else's star instead
Hmm.
of realizing that we are a star and that it's,
Yeah,
like peeling all that away is allowing, that's how we allow ourselves to shine. But that takes a
yeah.
long time to, get
Well,
there.
and I was replacing parents, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a normal thing too, is that when you move away from, especially moving away from the security of home, I was looking for home again
Yes.
in a new place,
Yeah.
and really not knowing how to create home for myself.
I was just going to say, right? Like everywhere we go, there we are. Like we're home.
Yeah,
We have to find that within. Yeah.
yeah. And so I just don't think I was there. I think I was just looking for it externally for a long time.
Sure. Yeah.
But so in during that time, that's when as I was completing my master's in music, that's when I started realizing, like, hey, I don't know if I want this gig.
So, okay. So you got an undergrad in music also.
Hmm.
So were you thinking at that time you were going to become a professional musician? Is that the
Hmm.
path that you were sort of
Yeah, yeah.
on?
I was on that path, and also I wanted to be an academic in music. I wanted to,
Mm-hmm.
probably French horn professor somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It was the playing of music and music pedagogy at a college level that was interesting to me. I didn't want to be a band director, never did. So I wasn't a music ed major. I was always performance.
Mm-hmm. And then where did that so walk me through a little bit. Like you did the undergrad, you went into master's degree.
Hmm. And the thought was beyond that. I was going to go and get a doctorate in music after that, like,
Yep.
because that's pretty much the path of an academic. Um, but during that master's program, I started feeling like I kind of wanted to be out of college for a little bit. I wanted to experience something else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also I hated the thought of like still being a nomad for quite some time. Because at that point, I'd been at several different college towns. Like that was like the third college town I'd been in. And I'm like, I'm a little sick of that. And I didn't like the thought of how unable to build community and build
Mm-hmm.
roots that I was going to be as a performer.
Mm-hmm.
That I was going to have to go wherever the gig was. That I was going to have to, like that I still had so much nomad. Um, and I was thinking, did I want a family? Did I want kids? Like
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't even sure if I'd even ever given myself room for thinking about it,
Mm-hmm.
because I was so enamored of like the horn and getting out and kind of seeing the world, that I hadn't even thought like, hey, do I want to like put down roots somewhere? Do I want a family? Do I
Mm-hmm.
want so that's when I thought, well, after I graduate, I thought about, for a split second, I was like, maybe I'll go get a law degree. And I don't even know where that came in. It was just like, it was like the panic of not knowing what was next.
Right.
And I was like, well, I could just go back and study more.
Right. Yeah. I want to get away from being a nomad and going to another school, but maybe just diving deep into some other
Yeah.
distraction will be
Right.
the answer. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, luckily I had gone down to Scottsdale and found it enchanting in a different way. And I was like, how about I just get an apartment and a job and like see what that's like.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I ended up doing. I went down to the valley. I found an apartment. I found a gig. It was working for a marketing and demonstration company in their office. So the ladies that give out samples, it was the company that hires and contracts those ladies, doing some back end administrative work. So a lot of photocopying and data entry.
Yeah.
In an
And so
office
what
by
time
myself.
period was this? Like what year, where are we at time wise?
I graduated from my master's in music in 2003.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Yes, that's right. So 2003.
Early
Um,
2000s then. Mm-hmm.
And then started with that marketing and demonstration company. It wasn't the right gig, and I was really isolated. I made up for some of that isolation by staying playing. I played in the Salt River Brass Band with a couple of musicians I really admired, Sam Palafian and Pat Sheridan. Sam was definitely a mentor of mine and someone I respected. He passed in a couple years ago, or I think it's a couple years, maybe just a year ago, from brain cancer. But he is a great force in the community, and just one of those great mentors that touch so many people's lives. So being able to stay connected to people I
Mm-hmm.
admired and music in that way, but like I could feel the music was receding for me a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Did you
As it
have
necessarily does.
any because I know, having been through kind of some major pivots in my own life, right? Like
Mhm.
there can also be that not fear of letting go of the thing, but thinking, gosh, I invested so much time, energy,
Yeah.
money
Hmm.
into this endeavor. Now I look at that kind of stuff very differently, and I'm able to let go of some of that stuff. But like
Yeah.
at that point, was there a little bit of like, was it easier to kind of fade it out by still staying, having a foot kind of in that world in a different way, but like, pulling out of it? Was there an awareness of like, yeah, but like,
Yeah. It felt like kind of like staying in the ensemble for a little bit felt like I was just trying to keep a toe in, and it felt
mm-hmm,
weird, and it felt like a little bit more of a wrench. Like it just kind of stabbed me in the wrong way at that moment. I was like, yeah, this is just reminding me that I'm not doing that.
yes,
And
right.
it was just like it was too little. Like I felt like I either wanted to be in that or of that, or I needed to just put it
Mm-hmm,
aside for a minute and figure out like I needed to allow space for something else. And
yes.
so that really pushed me to doing a lot of, build my own career coach. I started reading every career coach because like mainly I was like, okay, I have all of this stuff that I did and I studied. Like, how can I put this to work in my career? Like, how can I use this to help build instead of feeling like I'm just starting from scratch? Because I put too much work in that to make this like it doesn't count for anything.
Mm-hmm,
So what the first real like career coaching spark I got was reading a book that is used by so many career coaches, and I think is one of the best. Like if you're going to read one book um, that's career coaching, I think you should get this one. It's What Color Is Your Parachute? Right.
I saw the cover. In fact, I have it on my shelf. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, every single career coach does. It's kind of like the Bible of like career changing. Right? It's all about figuring out what are those transferable skills, what is it that you're bringing to the table, even if you don't have experience in the thing that you're moving toward.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of like the beginning of me having an interest in like job searches, that basically I had to go through a massive career change and become my own career coach.
Mm-hmm. Let me interject and ask, since we're all about intuition, and wanting to, really like help people tune in and tap into that innate sort of gift that we all have, but some people don't realize, when they're hearing it. Were there moments that you were, because I know you're very intuitive as well, but were you aware of that at that time in your life? And what did that look or sound like?
I don't know that that's interesting, because I don't know that I thought at that time that I was very intuitive. One of the things that I started to see right then was um, I had an understanding that music wasn't necessarily about music for me. I think when you hear a lot of musicians talk about um, their connection to music, it's about the art,
Mm.
or you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it was about the people. It
Mm.
was about it was about ensemble. It was about connection and communication.
Yes.
And so I started to have a sense that um, that what I wanted to find was something that allowed me to tap into that. Like that was the thing that I was missing. It wasn't the French horn.
Mm-hmm.
As lovely as the instrument is, it was really an ensemble. It was working with the team. So I had a very isolated role, and I knew that the job that I was working, that like me working in an office by myself on the weekend, was the opposite of what I needed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember looking for a job, and I started searching adjectives instead of job titles because I just kept not finding what I was looking for. I just kept getting more of the same.
Right.
So one day I actually searched the word fun. I was like, you know what? I want a company that will actually talk about like I need some fun to get through my day. I need motivation. So I need
Right.
people that care about that.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like a frivolous thing to search, but it was something that was really core. I'm like, I'm a silly person that needs to have fun in my day.
Yeah.
So I I found a startup, a job board that was looking for somebody to be like their admin assistant, but also answer the seeker help desk questions. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I thought that sounded amazing. I was like, I can talk to people, I can interact with them. And it was so cool to go into a startup culture that felt collegial. It felt like that environment that I was used to and that I loved
Mm-hmm.
of young people energy and spending way too much time at work probably. But
Right. Well, and you were younger, so you had lots and lots of energy, right?
I had nothing but time and
Uh-huh.
energy to give, so it was a good time to be at a startup, right?
Yeah. Well, and
It-
how awesome is that you were pulled, drawn, magnetized to a job board, like a company that literally helps people find jobs. And that's really what your biggest question was, like, well, what is next for me? What am I
right.
supposed to be doing? And yeah, so that's lovely.
Yeah, I thought, well, if I want to explore the world of work, like what better place to do it? I was like, if nothing else, this is going to be a good launch pad.
Mm-hmm.
Right, this is a good place to go figure some stuff out. And it ended up being that in spades. I met a wonderful mentor. My boss Rebecca is forever going to be my example of, tell me about your best boss. She was just an amazing teacher on so many levels of what it meant to be a professional, of what it meant to be a good manager, a good leader, and what it meant to really connect with other people.
And how did she embody that? What were some of the qualities or ways of being that, you would look at her and go, God, I want some of that. Like, obviously we're drawn to those people because we want more of that for ourselves. So what were some of those qualities that she embodied?
Well, one of them was that she always gave people the benefit of the doubt.
Mm,
She assumed good intent, which as a person with at that time undiagnosed anxiety problems, that was a really hard thing for me to do, and I didn't realize how it sabotaged my relationships with people to not assume that somebody was trying their best and you know what I mean, like
mm-hmm,
because it was just anxiety going, oh, they must think that you're incompetent, or they must think that you're dumb, or they must, that's kind of liar in my head was
mm-hmm.
going full tilt. And so to see somebody that had um this thing, she just had this complete compass of oh, this person that I'm talking to that works for me is absolutely trying their very best to get this done. And so like we always felt like she had our back, like she was always there to help us. And that level of just like constant there for support, constant rock, just that absolute complete trust that I had in her, that she was able to instill through that, it was probably one of the greatest lessons I've learned in my career.
Well, and just to acknowledge, like, that's who you are. Like,
Oh,
when you were describing, the anxious you with those thoughts and, making up stories in your mind about what people were thinking or intentions and what. I don't know that version of you. I've never known that version of you. So you've come a long way, baby.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's some hard one, and back to I didn't know which dragons I was fighting. I was so attracted to that, I think, because it was really a constant daily struggle that hadn't acknowledged at that point in my life that I was fighting.
Yeah. So how long were you at jobbing, and then what? Jobbing is what led you to ASU, right?
Yeah, I was at jobbing for 6.5 years. And during that time, I kind of rose from being an admin assistant to being the director of job seeker experience. So I was overseeing like all kinds of things that were job seeker facing. And
so what did that look like? What were some of the things that you built or that emerged from, during your transition from this to this extraordinary role?
Well, I did a little bit of IT project management around things that faced the job seeker portion of the business, because there's a huge part of the business, the part that actually generated revenue, was facing the employers, because that's where the money comes from. They weren't charging job seekers for anything, so it was a really interesting thing to own the part of the process that could be seen as like a cost center. But I had the wonderful privilege of them understanding that really engaging job seekers is like, that was what the employers were paying for.
Right. So just explain for people who don't know jobbing, or at least at that point, who knows what iteration their business is in at this point. But so at that point, it was a job board. The employers paid to be on there and promote their jobs, but there was no business model revenue generation going on the candidate side.
Correct.
Obviously, what you said, what the employers are paying for.
Yeah, except for then we got to a point where Lehman Brothers happened, and all of a sudden we were in a mass unemployment event. We went from having, we had the nation's largest career fairs in our local market, so we were locally focused. That was our niche. We only had job boards in places where we had offices, so that meant a huge real estate investment was made. And because the housing market fell, that real estate, like having all those leases at all of those different locations, was a real part of why we had to go from 500 employees down to 50. So I had made it from being employee number 70 all the way up to 500, and then back down to 50. So it was a crazy time.
Well, and so just to put a pin in, or a little just an asterisk, what an amazing thing for you to experience for future Karen who's coaching clients, right? Like, hey, I've been through total growth, and then boom, knocking all the dominoes down and bringing it all back to basics. So that's an incredible thing that that's like foreshadowing, right, in storytelling. So you didn't know at the time that you were being set up to have more empathy, to have more awareness, understanding, compassion, and also what it takes to then pick yourself back up and move along down the road.
Well, and I was helping all of these friends of mine that were losing their jobs. I was helping them get settled in new places and do their job search. And also we had launched an outplacing product at that time, which was companies that were laying people off. They weren't hiring. So we had to try to find something to sell them, right? So then we were selling outplacement services. So I was acting as a career coach for the first time through that. And, I had spent a lot of time communicating with career coaches through my kind of community relations piece of helping, our community relations team being able to engage with career services in our different local markets, to reach job seekers, right? And to provide them with resources as well. So I'd seen these people and I knew they were my people. And then I engaged in a practice that I still recommend to my clients today. I had an informational interview with Carey Sanderson.
Oh, God bless the informational interviews. I'm still a huge fan. I always was a fan.
And she was a wonderful career coach to me.
So let's explain what the informational interview is, and then, about your informational interview with Carey and where that led you on your path.
Yeah. So an informational interview isn't like a normal, like a job interview. It's where you're going to have a conversation with someone, not to get a job, but to ask them about some aspect of their work. So it can be about the type of role that they're doing, if you want to make a change into that type of role, or it can be like, I've never worked for that big organization that you work in. What's it like to work at X? What does that company value? What are they looking for in candidates? What's been your experience there? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it?
Which is so important. People always forget. They're like, I remember when we were coaching all these MBAs, I need to go work at Apple and Amazon. I'm like, do you know?
Yep.
What have you talked to people that work there? Like, it could be for you, but it might not be for you.
Yeah, like think about it. Like people would come to us and they would say, "Oh, really want to work for this company," and we would know their personality, and we'd
Right.
be like, I don't think you know the person, because we knew the personality mismatch was there. Like people that wanted to work for, okay, so I'll just say the name of the company, Hinkle. Right. So that was dialed that and there was nothing wrong with them. It was that it was a German company that was very kind of strict,
structured,
process. And then we'd have these like kind of wild free
spirits. Yeah.
And I was
because they all wanted to be brand managers. So there were these
Right?
creatives that were thinking like, that's where I want to go be a brand manager for these products. And we were like, go talk to a few people that work there and then come back.
Yeah, and then they would come back to us and they'd be like, "Oh my God, you saved me."
Yes.
And I'm like, "Yeah, right? Like, let's talk to you about like, what is that right fit? What is that right environment?"
Yes. And so I have a really quick story to interject about informational interviewing, because this is literally what I would share when I was doing career coaching at ASU and built it into some of my courses or webinars or workshops about informational interviews, because people dread it. And it's like, actually, it's a really fun thing. So in college during undergrad, I was a broadcast journalism major. And for our senior project, we had to go do an informational interview of someone who had a job that we either wanted or a few jobs above what we thought coming out of undergrad we would want. So I had found that the program manager at a radio station, I was very much into broadcasting at the time and thought that I was going to have a career in broadcasting at that point, there was an alum of my school. I went to Lindenwood. It was Lindenwood College at the time in St. Charles, Mo. Now it's Lindenwood University. So Scott Strong was the program manager at a major radio station in downtown St. Louis, which is a pretty major market. Now, mind you, I wasn't going there looking for a job or anything. I was like, I have this project. I have to do this informational interview. So I think at that point, I don't even know if I emailed him. Like, was email a thing in the mid to late 90s? I don't know. I either emailed him or called him, right?
You probably
called him. I don't know. But was like, hey, can I come down? Would love maybe
hit his pager.
I think this was pre-pager. I don't even know. So, yeah, that's in the Wayback Machine. So I remember reaching out and saying, hey, would love a quick tour of the facility, would love to maybe meet with an on-air personality and just sit and ask you some questions about what it's like to be a program manager at a major market radio station. Cool, come down. Here's the time. And like to go from the suburbs in St. Charles, Missouri to downtown St. Louis, like I didn't spend a lot of time downtown. I mean, I did a little bit in college, we hit the bars downtown occasionally, but it wasn't like I was really familiar. It's a big city. Downtown St. Louis is a big city. So that in and of itself was intimidating just to get from, like, I don't even remember that part. Like, I guess I drove myself. I don't know. It's not like we had Google Maps at that time either.
Right.
So I get there. He and I are meeting in his office. We're chatting. I'm asking him, I have my notebook with my questions all ready and prepared. And, I'm like, how'd you get, kind of like this, how'd you go from being at Lindenwood to, being an on-air talent, working your way. He talked me through a conversation very similar to this, right? Not super scary, or I wasn't asking him for anything. So through that conversation, then he flips it and he starts asking me questions. And then he brings me around and gives me a tour, and then he takes me into the studio, and I'm like, holy shit, this is a studio at a major market, right? And like the DJs look cool and fun, and, it's mid-90s and there's some like grungy. I was like, what? Like, how freaking cool is this? He brings in the music director, because I was the music director at the college campus station. So I meet her. They give me a bunch of free CDs and t-shirts, and then she leaves and goes about her business. And he goes, so what do you work? And I was like, what? I was like, yeah, I have a part-time job. I like waited tables or whatever. He's like, would you rather be on the radio? And I was like, what? And he said, we are always looking for part-time people to fill in on holidays and weekends, and when any of the full-time staff doesn't want to work, we need some people on air. He's like, you have a good voice, you have a good presence, what do you think? And I was like, yes, please. So that led to my first opportunity. I had no idea going into that could happen. And that's what can happen over and over and over again. But it also allows you to, exactly what you said, see the culture of the organization. I got to be in there. I got to feel the energy. And I've done informational interviews where I was like, hail to the no.
Right.
I'm coming on board of this shit show. Thank God I came in here to talk to whoever, because I just saved myself a ton of heartache. Like, what if you'd gone through the whole interview process and you get the job and then you're there and you're like, these people are loco. Yep. So that's just a little snippet of a story that I always love to share with people, because if you really just go in with an open mind and really it's an exploratory conversation, you're looking to connect and get to know the other person, evaluate sort of, one, like you said, the role. Like, do I even want to do this job? Is this something that I would want to do? Does it fit my strengths and what I can, do I have value to add here? But also the culture of the organization.
Yeah. And, the other thing Carey was able to talk me through is because it was a career change. Since I was coming from a job board with this role, like director of job seeker experience, what is that? I was coming from a corporate startup. And
what was Carey's role and where was she?
She was the career services at Gateway Community College.
Okay.
So part of that Maricopa Community College network that's so fabulous in Phoenix. And she had a wonderful program. I believe she was director at that point, but I'm not sure. But wonderful, both administrator and coach. And I had known her through jobbing. She had been in the community relations role there. So that was, a former colleague that was doing something that was really, like, I felt like the right next thing for me, but I really wanted to talk to somebody in it. And she just went through all of the, like you said, the kind of ins and outs, but then was able to help me with the real, really important part was like, what objections are they going to have to me? What are their concerns going to be going in for, like, because I had seen this job open at ASU and I wanted to apply to WP Carey, the MBA program, because I had just received my MBA through the program as well. So I felt like that was something I had going for me. But I needed help from her to, like, how do I make a case that I can do this gig?
Right. So that transitional, like, how do you spin your skill set, your strengths, what you do here, which is a huge part of what we coach people through, that they just didn't, they kind of would resist that piece too, right? Or not even resist it. They didn't understand. I mean, I even have like executive level clients that I've worked with in the last handful of years that trying to transition, right? Like, people can't see, like, you still did your brain still operates the same way. And so then it's just like, how do we then look at what this new role is and pull those strengths over and communicate the value of, well, I did this here and it looks like what I assume this bullet point in your job description is over here.
Yeah. And it was also, being able to, have them understand that I knew academia and why I knew it. And, my depth of experience as a student, but also as an employee at universities the entire time. Like, I worked at schools the whole time, and pretty extensively worked in some nice administrative roles that I thought could be, very, very relevant. But, she walked me through the, like, what are their objections going to be, and how can I speak the language that they would understand, that they were listening for, so that they would know I got it. And I think I never would have been able to go and have a conversation with you and have you buy that I could do the gig if I hadn't had that conversation.
And quite honestly, in that interview, I saw that and I understood, and I knew what we needed for that role, which was very different from what the other career coaches were doing. And so there was definite pushback. They were like, well, because the other coaches, like we said earlier, supported the full-time MBA, which was a very different experience than what we needed to do to support evening executive and online. They needed a lot more resources and access to things, whereas the full-time coaches were presenting a lot of that stuff face-to-face in office and or via a face-to-face class. And so, yeah, I really was the advocate and the voice at the table for you, because I was like, but that's not, she's not going into that role. She's going into this new role that we're creating to support these other people. So, yeah. Okay. So you hop, can we fast forward a little bit, and
Yeah,
then we'll do,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then we'll do a little. I'm trying to be conscious of your time,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
because I then want to get us to the STAR method, which we've
Yes.
loosely kind of started getting towards. We're naturally moving in that direction. I just want to wrap up, kind of like getting you to ASU, and then getting you to where you are right now, and then we'll kind of get a little bit into the tactical stuff, and
Yeah.
the
So
circle will be complete.
yes. So I got the gig. I started my journey on, coaching at ASU. There was a point then, where, I thought I would never leave that gig. And
Mm-hmm.
then there was just like this pull, like everything in my life, for some reason, I was like a big man in a little suit,
Right.
nothing fit.
Yeah. You're like, neat. Everything feels a little crunchy.
Yeah, and I got to that one of those decision points again where I was like, oh, yeah, like I started trying to change things at the periphery, and I was
Mm-hmm.
circling things.
Mm-hmm.
But like there was one key thing that wasn't working out, and it was my marriage at that point was there were so many things that weren't working with it, and there was no talking about it. There was no getting any change to happen within it. So I just kept trying to change everything else. I quit my job. I started another random job that wasn't a good fit. Like, I don't know. It was just like, okay, well, maybe if I keep changing all this peripheral stuff, maybe my life will be okay and it'll start to
Yes.
fit again. And it was not working.
It's that whole like Band-Aid on the bullet wound, right? Like, I'll just
Hmm.
put a Band-Aid on this. It's, it's hemorrhaging, but I'm going to just slap another Band-Aid on it. We'll try to like keep it tucked down instead of just ripping that puppy off and then
Right. Everything
letting
was
it
on
heal.
fire and I was
Yeah.
sitting here going, it's fine.
And so, side note, perhaps we're going to have Karen on. She's going to be our resident career coach. So we can get more into this in another episode, the healing and the health stuff. So
Hmm.
just know that the Karen we're seeing today is very different because, we can, and we should, because I have many health challenges that I overcame as well. And a part of that is, right, like the stress. Like we always hear like stress affects your health, and people don't know, it's like very ambiguous and amorphous, and like, what does that
Yeah.
really mean? It's like, when your life is on fucking fire, your body starts to shut down.
Oh yeah. I got to the point where I felt like, if I stick with this, it's going to kill me.
Mm-hmm.
It was just my health was tanking so fast,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't get any traction. So that's the point where I just hit the nuclear option,
Blew
moved
it
it
up.
back, moved back to the Midwest, started over, and was like, okay, this is me building it from the ground up. What do I want my life to look like? What serves me now? Not like Karen 10 years ago, not Karen 2 years ago. Like, what do I need right now? And I think that's when I got really clear, like, everything either has to be like, let's go ahead and swear, everything has to be a fuck yes, or I'm not going to do it.
Absolutely.
And because when you start over like that, if you're
We call that like the holy fuck. There's another coach. Oh gosh, I'm blanking on her name, but she called, it's like the holy yes, the holy fuck. It's fuck yes or fuck no.
yes.
Or it'll
And
keep
so
just showing up. It'll just keep showing up, right?
right, like because I was living too many things I wasn't in agreement with, that weren't true to me. I was married to somebody that, like, it really believed a whole bunch of different things than I did. I valued different things than I did, wanted different things than I did,
Right.
and that was always going to be a problem. Like, I was
Wasn't in
never going to be able
alignment.
to. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so and because I was looking, it was like what we said earlier. I was trying on other people's thoughts. I was trying, and
Yeah.
it kept not working out. So I think that was and I struggled with it too. I still had another whole year of kind of, no, this isn't right, no, that isn't quite right. And I had a few more rungs to fall down before I finally started, like, one thing worked. I got some medical help from, like, I was unemployed. I was homeless. I was living in a friend's guest room, and I ended up on Medicare, which, thank goodness, and food stamps, and that was the
I
moment.
didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
that was the moment where, like, all of a sudden, like, this kind of nobody backwoods neurologist ended up doing, like, these old treatments that really ended up being the thing that helped me.
Mm.
And then I was just, I started trying everything. It was like I had been so afraid to do stuff because of all the health stuff for a while that I just started trying everything. So
Mm-hmm.
me and my friend, we built, I helped her build a shed from scratch. I'd never built anything. And we went on a big kayaking trip. I'd never been kayaking. And all of these things, I started just feeling like there was a lot more possibility than I had thought
Mm-hmm.
previously.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these things that I wanted in my life just started showing up because, like, I was looking for them. And I think I was getting some clarity on what worked for me, what served me, and what didn't.
Yeah. Well, and gaining clarity on your values and really,
Hmm.
sorry, all these sunshine spots. It's the disco ball sometimes too. Like it hits them and
Mm,
then, but I'm right
it's
by a window.
it's your
So
fairy light. It's your fairy
it's,
light.
yes, I called them in and they're here joining us.
All your sprites. Yeah. So really, it ended up being just the best thing. And now, I get flashing forward to this moment, where I'm stepping more into my private coaching practice, which it's been slowly ramping up for years and years, but making that like the thing. And that's been a seed in the back of my mind. That's that's been a long way coming this whole time.
Yeah. And so I just want to, two things. One, we definitely need to have a separate conversation on all of the health stuff, right? That part
Hmm.
of the journey,
Yes,
but
yes,
also a
yes.
separate conversation of the building of the business, because I think
Hmm.
a lot of listeners are interested in, especially now, right? A lot of people lost their jobs. They're not interested in going back to a jobby job.
Yeah.
And so they may want to create something, but they don't know what. And it seems really scary and overwhelming. And that's something that I'm trying to challenge myself with, is showing a little bit more behind the scenes and
Yep.
what that looks like, because I've been coaching forever. So I have the skill set to do the thing that I'm doing here, right? But I
Hmm.
haven't run a business doing it. And so that's very different, the doing the work versus building the business doing the work. So I'd love to have that
Yes.
conversation, because I know, even in the last couple of years, you have contracted with some universities and did remote coaching of their MBA students, and then there were some outplacement companies, but you're like stripping all that away and really like
Hmm.
building out nerdy girl career coach.
Yes. So
I wore my nerdy glasses just for you today.
I love it. I didn't wear any because the ones that I wear, there's so much glare. You'd never see my beautiful
Oh,
eyes.
I
So,
love your beautiful eyes. We
um,
definitely are like sisters from another dimension. Like when we work together at ASU, people are like, "Are you guys sisters?"
well,
Karen
and
used to have blonde hair.
I had blonde hair, so well,
Yes.
not natural, of course. This is my natural color.
It suits your personality.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think probably I was back to trying to blend into my environment. I was definitely trying to blend in with Scottsdale a
What?
little bit with the blonde.
Yeah.
Well, and to be fair, we were all trying to fit into it. So,
Right.
um, but so back to your comment about the star stories, because this is a
Yes. Let's
so
jump into that.
so when people come to me and they start wanting help with a career coach, a lot of times people, the first thing they really want is they just want you to be their resume writer. They're
Mm,
like, oh, like the one thing that people know to do is get out that blessed Word document and spend all of their time on that poor little sad piece of paper. And I and the interesting thing is so little about what's going to get you the next gig. And if they had known, like, the thousands and thousands and thousands of people I've seen at this point, um, getting ready for the next thing in their lives, of the resume has a part to play, but it's not the lead starring role,
right.
right? And we give far too much time to it. But I think the big thing is, it's just like what we've been talking about this whole time. It's the stories that we can tell. it's
Hmm.
it's like, what is the story of you and how you got here? What is that journey?
So before we get to the star method and what that is, where are those places besides the resume that people tell
Mhm.
their story? So why
Yes.
is that important? Like the star method will help us fine tune and refine the story. Where are those places then that we take get from that? Where do we pepper that throughout the job seeker experience?
Yeah, it's in the profiles that we write about ourselves online. You know, a bio maybe on the company's website, or your LinkedIn profile page, where most people do their networking online for work. But also the conversations we have with people, maybe at once networking events happen again, or the casual conversations you might have waiting for your oil to get changed, or just the way that you might talk in an interview, just the way you professionally story tell. What are those details that you bring out about yourself when you're talking to other people about the work that you do?
Yeah. And that requires work, right? Like you have to know what those little gems and nuggets are in your story, because maybe you end up at dinner at a friend's house and the VP of ABC company is there and you're like, holy shit. Like we always hear about the elevator pitch, but really it's like, it is important to condense it down into a soundbite, because we still live in that sort of world, right? Because initially that's all you get is that little soundbite moment. So say you're at a dinner party and the VP of yada yada is there.
Yeah.
Once you get past the initial like, hey, introduction, whatever, what are those little nuggets then that you maybe can share that's going to perk their ears and go, oh, like, oh, interesting. We may want a you at our organization.
Yeah, because I don't have 2 hours to tell them about how I started off playing French horn and how I ended up running my own career coaching business.
Right.
Like we've stepped through it. It's a hard story
Well,
to
yeah,
tell.
that was an hour. That was right at an hour that we told your story, right? And so then what are those little gems and nuggets?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So people come to me and they ask me, like, Karen, tell me a little bit about what you do. And the thing I can say now is I've really thought and distilled down what it is I'm doing when I'm working with clients, what it is that is kind of like has always been important to me. And it's storytelling. And so I don't talk to them about doing resumes. I don't talk to them about the fact that I'm preparing people for interviews and stuff like that. I tell them, I help people clarify and tell their stories so that their strengths come through, their talents come through, and they can connect with the best possible fit, because I'm passionate about people, that we don't have to be miserable at work, that like there is so much variety in the world of work that there's a place that's a good fit for everybody and a good fit for everyone's talents. So I want people to be happy and love what they do at work, because we have to spend a lot of time doing that stuff.
So let's just share what STAR stands for, and then let's walk through what that might sound like what we might put into that format.
Right. So STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. So when you're breaking down, like let's say in an interview, somebody says, Karen, can you tell me about a time where you...
The old tell me about a time.
Tell me about a time where you made a mistake. And I can tell them about the time that I accidentally ordered $2,000 worth of tape. And so...
Tell me all about it.
Right. So this is what it looks like. So the situation was that I was working as an admin assistant. I answered the phone call one day from a salesperson who was selling office supplies. Now, we already had a negotiated agreement with a company where we got our office supplies, but he just wouldn't let me go, and I couldn't say no. So I placed what I thought was going to be like a little like $12 order of just some tape and some sticky notes and nothing big. And it's just when I forget about it promptly, and then it all starts showing up. It's just the boxes start coming in. I'm like, what is this? Why is there a wall of boxes in front of me? And I ask, and I get this invoice, and there it is, like $2,000 worth of tape. I accidentally, instead of getting like I ordered gross of things, a gross of things instead of a thing, and it was a deceptive sales practice that they were engaging in. And so, in order to return it, I had to. Then it was going to be like $300 to restock it. So immediately, how I handled it was I took the receipt and I went into the CFO's office, and I was like, "Look, I've made a mistake. I was like, this is what happened. And now we have $2,000 worth of tape. And true to a CFO, he sat there and he did the math to see if it was a good deal on tape. And I you know what, that's the best CFO reaction I think I've ever had. But because I actually I think I might have put my hand on his arm, and I was like, wait a minute, I need to just ground this in the fact that we will never use this much tape.
Holy cow.
And so anyway, so the action I took, so in that situation, so the situation really was the mistake, right? And you know, the one thing I have to say here is that people usually spend too much time on the situation,
yes.
because the setup's already in the question, right? So here's the mistake I make. So I usually keep the story pretty short about I made a mistake and I ordered $2,000 for the tape. And then the action I took is I went and I communicated. I owned it. I said, this is what I did. I made a mistake. And I sought out help from someone that might have an idea of how we might handle it. And then the outcome. So the result is we were able to pay the couple $100 to restock it and send it back. And I also learned how to say no to salespeople, and you know, we negotiated these contracts for a reason, so we could get the best possible deal. I just kind of stuck with it, you know, like going forward, if something needed to be tried that was different, I would engage the other people that were involved in making the decision the
Procurement.
first time. Yeah. And really, you know, and not feel pressured on the fly into doing something that you know wasn't actually really evaluated and studied to make sure it was like, you know, the best practice. So I learned so much about how a business makes decisions, why they make decisions, and you know, going forward it was much easier to be informed of like, no, like, and because I'm not the person that makes the decision and we already have something in place. You know, it was just very easy and clear, but you know, that was an important early career thing to learn.
Yes. Well, and a super awesome example of a star story, right?
Yeah.
So you checked two things off the list, right? Like how to answer, tell me about a time you made a mistake, and then using the STAR method to tell that story. So thank you for the bonus lesson.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, I remember coaching a lot of MBA students, and the other piece too, like the result, the R. So there was also like, here's a situation, here was the task at hand, here's the action steps, and really breaking down those steps. So first I did this, then I did this, then I did this. It resulted in increase in sales by this to this percentage, this number, or a decrease in this from this to this, you know, year over year, Q1 to Q2, like whatever that sort of, you know, but the number piece and the showing the results. And that's where people get kind of locked up because we're not taught to keep track of results. So you really do have to go into the archives, right? Of like, and think about specific examples where you did increase, decrease, you know, how did you add value to that situation? And so I remember that being the piece that was always the hardest. Like people could get the situation, and they could even, sometimes they would get a little lengthy even in the action steps, right? Like, so we would talk to them a lot about, first you did this, then you did this, then you did this, like 3 steps. And then let's spend the bulk of the time talking about that juicy result.
Yeah, the action and result part, I think, is probably that's
so they can also see how your brain works, right? When you walk through those steps, then they see how you think, how you process information.
Right.
Yeah.
And they also see, you know, the reason those behavioral questions are even asked is because, you know, your past actions are the best predictor of your future actions. How you handled something in the past is very much a good predictor of how you're going to act in the future. And on top of that, like, so the example I gave was a negative example. So there's one more step past that R. If it is a negative example, if it is a story where you're having to talk about a mistake or a difficulty or something that's a challenge for you or a weakness, the next thing you really want to get to is talk about the lesson you learned. So there's an optional L. It's like star. It's a lesson learned. So if it's that negative thing, and that's what I got to at the end right there in my example, is I started talking about, and that was a very long-winded star story.
Sure.
I have to get it a little more compressed for an actual interview, but that lesson learned of being able to say, in the future, this is what I would do differently, or in the future, this is how I handled those things. Yes, of really like having them say like, okay, I saw that my obstacles or my failures I see as an opportunity to learn. And a big thing that's important to companies right now is that you have that growth mindset, that you're not taking failures and blaming other people and looking other places.
Oh yeah.
You're always taking it as an opportunity to learn and grow. So that being able to give those lessons learned is how you communicate that growth mindset.
And, we know, because we talked a lot to the employers, and you still have more recently than I have, right? Like a lot of companies, especially now in lieu of what's just happened with our world this last year, right? Like adaptability, flexibility, not being attached to outcomes, but also not being afraid to fail and fail fast. So we know specifically one company, Amazon, a lot of our students would go to work at Amazon, and they would say, we need people who are open to failing. We don't get new, fresh ideas by people trying to figure out and hemming and hawing and not being able to make a decision and just wanting it to be perfect. So I think there's a false narrative around I think that's part of what's on the way higher level, dismantling all the ish in 2020 and old systems and processes that no longer work or serve us, which is back to the storytelling piece and the coaching that you and I did 2 days ago, is how do we make sure we're showing up super authentically? Because when we try to put this false face on, that's just not, one, it doesn't resonate with people. It's not what people want. And that's not where we feel the most fulfilled. That's not where we get to show up and have juicy, fun sessions with clients or whatever it is people are doing in their jobs.
Yeah, usually the first time I start working on people, working on storytelling with people, especially interview preparation, with that in mind, people say, I don't like being fake and I don't like bragging. And those are two stumbling blocks that people have when they're going into this. So they're like, oh, that feels like bragging, or I don't really like talking about, tough on the don't feel like talking about yourself.
Right.
But that's the whole point of this, is that you do have to practice talking about yourself in that particular way. It's a weird type of conversation that people aren't used to having, like storytelling. Like you're used to telling stories about your personal life, about your family life, but getting used to telling stories about your professional life does take practice. It's a practicable skill. So the other thing is, because it feels different, that sometimes translates into I feel like I'm being fake. If I'm being or if I'm being professional and showing respect and boundaries and stuff, that feels like fake to me, because I'm used to my impersonal communication style.
So what is that middle ground, right?
Yeah. So I'm like, well, it is authentic to be respectful in an environment where somebody has earned respect. So it's the first thing we talk about, that respect and boundaries and professionalism is about creating rules of engagement that allow safety for everybody and allow us to conduct business free of the types of fights, arguments, dramas that happen in family life and personal life, because people don't have boundaries.
Yeah, that's a whole nother episode, right?
Right. So we have to even get to the heart of why does professionalism exist? Why do those respect and guidelines exist? And so you can still within that communicate who you are authentically, talk about the things that matter to you, but you have to get really clear on that, and you have to get really clear on how to talk about that professionally, respectfully, and in that business context. So it's a lot to practice, but who you are as a person absolutely has to come out. The last thing you should do is fake being somebody you're not, because you're just going to talk yourself into a job that's the wrong fit.
Totally.
Yeah, that was a lot.
That was a lot. That was a big download. We're power channeling again, girl.
Yeah.
So just we're at 20 minutes after the hour, and so just to also one final thread is then, so we pepper that, we get that crystallized, and we pepper that through what are those places that we then are able to, once we're able to communicate about that a little bit more effortlessly, where are then again those places that we pepper that information through?
Yeah. Like, so, one thing is if we get some really good accomplishment-based stories, some really good star stories and examples that you want to have come out in the interview, you then start reverse engineering the interview with your resume.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, it's really getting to that point where you can talk about your strengths and stories that highlight those strengths. Like, it's not enough to take the assessment. I need examples of how
Yes.
those strengths show up in your work life. So coming up with those examples and then weaving those stories, featuring those stories in your resume, and condensing that star story down to, like, okay, the situation and the task is really like the company and the title that you're in, and the action and result is what happens in each one of those bullets. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
thinking about the bullets just in that way, maybe, what is the problem that I solved, the action that I took, and the outcome, making sure that's in each one of your bullet points, you will have like the most juicy resume, and they're going to get a clear picture of you. So that's
Mm-hmm.
one place. It also can show up in your LinkedIn profile, how you tell a story about yourself. These are the things I'm passionate about. This is how I'm hardwired to show up to play, and these are the results that I've been able to get for people and businesses, and maybe I could get these types of results for you too. And then even to like how you reach out to people on LinkedIn, or how you initiate conversations with other people in your profession. I think having conversations with other career coaches has helped me more than anything else to become a better career coach.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
so if you're not engaging with other people that do the work that you do, like, why are you
You're
missing
just
it? It's like when I started my MBA and I was doing all of my MBA coursework by myself. Like, I was just alone in my apartment trying to like figure out all of this math. And I realized, like, that's how I muscled my way through too many
yeah.
degrees and things before. I'm like, no, if I just talk to the other people that are also doing the same things,
Right.
we get best practices.
Totally.
I get clarity on things that I have maybe like the wrong impression of. I find out earlier if I'm making a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of the things that would be such a struggle to figure out on your own, just engaging with with peers
Yeah.
is, and that's where the referrals and recommendations come into. That's how you get pulled into organizations. We could talk about that another time, but
Yeah, I'm feeling like what's coming from this too is like maybe we do some sort of Facebook or Instagram, like maybe not even a live, or just record something and share it there, like some sort of office hours where we can share some more of these specific types of tips, because it's obviously so rich. You and I could talk for days. So I so appreciate you hopping on here and sharing your story.
Yes.
It was fun to learn things I did not know about you. I always
Well,
love.
it was fun to story tell about my life. I feel like I got to have a nice little retrospective. This is a really great time to check in with that too. Like, I would actually recommend, if you have a chance to talk to somebody about your story in the next couple of weeks, do it, because biographize yourself a little bit, write a little journal entry, because this has been a great reflection for me, and then preparing me into the going into the new year. What do I want to bring with me, and what do I maybe want to trash and leave behind me?
Yeah, where you want to turn the volume up or turn it down or delete the file altogether, right?
Yep.
So in closing, where can people find you? How do they find you? How do they get to your juiciness? How do they get to work with you, or at least follow along, so that perhaps one day when they may need your brilliant genius, where do they find you?
Well, you can find me at www.nerdygirlcareercoach.com. I'm also Nerdy Coach Karen on Twitter, and they can find me at Facebook. If you search Nerdy Girl Career Coach, you'll find me there too.
Yes, and I know you're on LinkedIn as well, doing a lot of stuff
Yeah.
on the LinkedIn's. So also there's the Google, Nerdy
Yeah,
Girl Career Coach.
Yeah, and Karen Chontafalsky will get you.
Yeah.
It will get you me 100%, but I don't want to make you spell Chontafalsky.
Right.
So Nerdy Girl Career Coach it is.
Yes, and I will put all of the links, and we'll link it up in the show notes, so that we make sure everybody that needs to find you can find their career coach, sage, angel,
Yeah,
all the things.
I'd love to help you tell your story. I'd absolutely be delighted to do it.
Well, I appreciate you so much as a friend and as a professional, and being just a superstar at what you do. And I'm so excited to share you with the people, even though we're a baby podcast and we're just getting started. So I'm not sure, but we'll make sure we put this one back out there in rotation a couple of times so that people who join us later down the road know that they can go back to the library archives and find this gem of a conversation. I love you.
I love you. And thank you so much for having me today, Kammie.
Yes, thank you.
Wow, what a jam-packed and juicy convo, right? I'm super grateful to my sweet soul sister, Karen Chontafalsky, a.k.a. Nerdy Girl Career Coach, for joining me here today and for sharing her story, and for schooling us on how to use the STAR method as a power tool to share sound bites and stories for using on resumes, cover letters, on LinkedIn profiles, and other online profiles, and most especially for sharing in interviews or at networking events. I hope you gained some value from Karen's extensive knowledge and insights. And if you're in need of some career advising or assistance, don't hesitate to reach out to Karen. You can find her at her online home base at nerdygirlcareercoach.wordpress.com, or she's at Nerdy Coach Karen on Instagram. You can also find her on Facebook, Nerdy Coach Karen. Thank you so much for sharing your time and space with me today and for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the Cosmics Innerspace podcast, please leave a review on iTunes or go ahead and share this episode with a friend who might enjoy some of this juicy goodness. I'd love to stay connected with you. On Instagram, you can find me at KammieK.com. That's KammieKDotCom, where I do share a lot more Cosmics Innerspace vibes on the Insta stories. And I'm at KammieKDotCom on the Facebooks. And of course, we can always stay connected